So let's go in to start right now with our presentation. This is the outline. We will go through the rules one by one. I will do half of them, and then Patricia will continue with the other half. And then Patricia will also introduce a brainstorming feedback exercise that we want to do with you. So that is the really interactive part that we will have during our webinar. And we will need all your help during that session and all your attention during the introduction to the rules so you can participate in the brainstorming exercise. Then we will present what we observe from what you will introduce in these collaborative notes that please, if you don't have seen that link yet on the chat, please via the chat, let us know, and then Patricia or Prem will send you this link again. We will have some open questions and answers at the very end, and then we will wrap up. So let's go into the rules right now. Why did we decided to work on FAIR for training materials? The motivation is very important. We all have heard about FAIR, and if you remember the paper, it is heavily based on data. They talk about data, metadata all the time. They do include the expression digital objects, and they say that FAIR is meant to be for any sort of digital objects. Well, training materials are digital objects. However, just following the principles is kind of difficult to imagine, okay, how am I supposed to use these principles to actually make my training materials fair? And that is a question that trainers commonly face. So with a group of people, part of the ELIXIR training platform tool, we decided to take on the task of defining what we need to do in order to have fair training materials. These all started as a biohackathon project, this set of rules in 2018. And this year, 2020, we got the publication of 10 simple rules for making training materials fair. Oh, sorry. Moving to the next one. Now, why are we having this webinar today? Thanks to the paper, thanks to the publication, we have a good dissemination of the rules. But still, one thing is having the rules, and a different thing is putting them in action. And that is what we want to move next. How to make these rules a reality, how to really get training materials fair. And for that, we need your help. So our first purpose is for you to learn about the 10 simple rules and how the materials can get fair, and that you start applying these rules to your own training materials. But we also need your help getting feedback on how do you envision these rules can be applied and what sort of things you need to make them a reality and to make the whole journey easier for you as trainers. Quickly overview of the FAIR principles: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. The findable is mostly about identification. Identification that should be unique, should be global, and descriptive metadata so people know what is the thing, where to find it, and what it is about really, really quickly. Accessibility is about getting access to the actual training material or data or software, etc. For that, most of the things are supported over HTTP or FTP if you want to download the things. But something really important is that not everything is public. And where it is not, it is very important to have access rules. So everybody knows, oh, I need to subscribe to this membership page, or I need to pay. That is another option as well. Interoperability is mostly about the way that you structure the things so they can work and they can interconnect to others. Reusability is about community standards, is about provenance, is about license, all those things that the community needs to know for reuse any sort of material. Now, interoperability and reusability so far seems to be the most challenging principles from the FAIR principles. And that is true not only for data, it is true for any other digital objects, training materials included. Let's go now into our 10 simple rules to make training materials fair. So we have as the first principle, as the first rule, share your training materials. We will start from here, and then we will move to some rules that are related to the findability, rules from 2 to 4. Then we will move to accessibility, particularly rule number 5 is about accessibility, but a little bit the rule number 4 also will help there. Then I will the word to Patricia. I will the floor to Patricia, and Patricia will help us to navigate through the interoperability and reusability rules for training materials, starting with formats and moving to some elements that are desirable in training materials for trainers, but also for trainees. Let's start with sharing. So when you share your training materials, you are reaching everybody. If you don't, well, people will not know about your training materials. And without knowing about them, it is impossible to go fair. So sharing your training materials and having this mindset about, yes, I want to do it and I want to do it so everybody can find my materials and can reuse them and can benefit out of them is the first thing that it is our rules, sharing. The second rule is about describing your training materials. And the way that you describe your training materials is with metadata. So what is metadata? Metadata is a way to talk about a thing. The training materials are the thing. But for instance, what is the title? That is metadata. Who is writing these training materials? Who is the author? That is metadata. When was this training material updated for the latest time? That is metadata. And all that metadata help people to really know what is the status of your training materials, what is this about, what is the audience, etc., etc. The metadata for people will be kind of a paragraph, maybe a bullet point, but for machines, they need to follow a very specific structure format. For our rules, we have been collaborated with bioschemas so we can express in a very structured way all the description about our training materials. I invite you to go to bioschemas.org and learn a bit more about the specifications for course instance, and training materials. We are not covering only training materials, but courses and course instance as well. Some of the elements that you will see there are those that I have already mentioned: the author, the contributors, the published date or the modified date, the title, the audience, the learning outcomes, the prerequisites, what you need in order to take this material, what is the level, beginner, intermediate, etc. All of that is metadata. The unique identity. The unique identity, people can think, oh, I have a URL. I'm doing good there. But not quite. I mean, URLs are great, but nowadays we want identifiers that are unique, that are persistent, that are global. For instance, ORCID for researchers, DOIs for publications, or other persistent identifiers. DOIs are also used for slides presentations, for instance, if you have shared something via Figshare or so on. So it is important to have this unique identity. And I mentioned Figshare, for instance, for slides, right? In Figshare, you can deposit your slides so people can find it in there. But sometimes, maybe you have your training materials in your institution, but still you want to reach kind of a broader audience. You want to go kind of to a bigger picture. And then we have registers for that. Sometimes they are also called directories. We call them registries. We have, for instance, the ELIXIR training portal, the test portal, and then you can, via some metadata that test will ask you, include your training materials and say what it is about. So more people will get access to them. It is very important going for these online registries. Of course, with some keywords on your training materials going directly to Google, people will be able to find your material, but maybe after some trouble. While with these specialized portals, it's easier for people to say like, oh yes, it's training materials. This portal is about training materials. For sure, I will find some nice and relevant training materials in here. So the registries are important, and we also have the Goblet registry for training materials. Define access rules. So we already mentioned, you go to a portal, you go to Google, you find the document. But what should you do in order to access these material? Well, you need to know how to really get access to it. If it is public domain, maybe just with the DOI on your materials, for instance, you go to the DOI is resolved, and you get to the web page that has your training materials. But sometimes it is also possible that you say, no, actually, I want people to subscribe to our newsletter, so we more or less know better who our users are, and then we can target better to them, our materials, our portal, our everything. So you require a membership for these. Or maybe universities follow this approach. For instance, we will deliver our training materials only for those students that are registered with the university. So you restrict the training materials to a certain domain. So only the students getting there can do it. Or maybe you have to pay for it. That is another option. And we have seen during these difficult pandemic times a boom in online training materials and platforms that will offer you, on top of the training materials, some courses, and sometimes you have to pay for them. All of the models are fine. The important thing is that you make clear what are the access rules for your training materials. And with this, I have finished a bit about findability and accessibility. So out of 4, we have checked 2 of the principal boxes in the 4 principles. Now we are going to hear from Patricia about interoperability and reusability for training materials. Patricia, do you want me to continue with the presentation and you will tell me next, or should
Yes. No, okay, I think it's great if you can do it. And since there are some animations also, so that's perfect. Yeah. So hello, everybody. Continuing what Leyla was saying, on rule number 6, it's interesting to think about interoperable formats, and from the perspective of the people who's using the materials. You see, usually we think about this as machines, from machine to machine, from programs to programs, and here we are talking about trainers. You see, how can me as a trainer reuse the training materials of someone else? So we all know, we all are teaching most of the time by doing slides, and those slides are usually on PowerPoint, and it's okay to use them, of course. The question is how we can share them and how can other people, trainers, reuse them. So they will need to also have the programs that we are using. PDF is something also that format that we use quite often, but in that case it's more difficult to update, to change that. Tech is another kind of language to describe documents. It's interesting because this one is more simple to use for some people that know how to program, because you have to run the program to make this visible. But there are other kinds of formats that we are using more and more, like Markdown, like HTML, or even Google Slides also. So we describe the types of formats that we use to do training slides in principle, but we also have sometimes data sets. We also have exercises that can be in different formats. And this is what we have to think of if we want to make other people, to let other people reuse the materials. What are the formats that can be more easily reusable by them? So this is about the number 6. If you can, yes, rule number 7 is how to make clearly the training materials reusable by the trainers. The next one is going to be about the trainees. So if we want people to reuse them, we have to let them know how they can reuse them. So giving the appropriate type of license will allow us people to know if they are totally copyright free, that you can reuse and not even mention people, or if you would like to be mentioned so that you like to be referenced and acknowledged of the work that you have done. So clearly stating what kind of license, for example, using this CC BY, for example, license is a way of doing this, and letting people know right from the start how they can reuse your materials. Another thing also is, as Leyla has said, we have to use metadata to describe what it is. So if this training material is going to be useful for me as a trainer or not. So everything that we can use as metadata to enrich and describe the material is going to be very useful. So as she said, the title, of course, contact details to whom I can talk to if I have a question or if there's anything that is not clear. A description, how the learning outcomes of this, once I have used in the type of setting that I have used, for which kind of public I have used, so the target audience, what were the prerequisites that were needed to attend that class for the training material that I'm using. So everything that could be easier for someone to take for a trainer to take your materials and be able to use them in another context and easily adapt to the context also. And the next rule, number 8, is how to make that easy for trainees. So if we put our materials online, available to anyone, accessible to anyone, trainees can also find these materials and they can learn from there by reading, by watching what we are showing, if it is a video, for example. So giving all the details, and so the metadata, the context in which these materials were produced, will also help the trainees to see if they can learn something out of that. So this is rule number 8. Welcoming contributions in rule number 9 is, if we put up the materials online and in the interoperable format where we accept contributions and people can easily contribute, people can give feedback not only, so people can have access to that and report any kind of errors or examples that are not working, or they would like to add, for example. Alternative explanations, so you can welcome this kind of contribution by other people, so you can also enrich your own materials with the contribution with other people. And in this case, it's important that we state clearly from the beginning how the people who are going to contribute are going to be acknowledged, and also how they can contribute. If it's going to be by email to you, if it's in a special place, how they can give that information for you. Also stating from the beginning what kind of expectation they can have on the contributions that they are going to give, and the kind of recognition that they are going to have if they contribute with anything. So if they click on the next, yes, usually nowadays when we use, many people are using GitHub to make their training materials online. And on GitHub, we can easily also see who are the people who have contributed. So that is a good format also that people are using to immediately see who have contributed, and sending issues also, opening issues and so on. So it's easier for the contribution in that sense. And finally, rule number 10 is we need to keep the materials up to date. We see we are in bioinformatics and in many different areas that change all the time, that evolve all the time. And we have screenshots, for example, or we have databases that we use, and we have versions of databases that we use. So those things change. And it's important also that we keep our slides or our materials up to date, so anyone can use and know when they have been done, how they can access. So version control of the materials is an important thing also. So having a timestamp is something that is important, because we will know when this was last updated, when it was created, for example, and when it was last updated. So people will know if they have, what are the things that they will need to check out, and when they will need to check out when they reuse your data. If we create a new version also, we have to decide also if it's going to be a totally new version. So we need a new PID with a new identifier. And if it is something that is outdated, that you are not going to update anymore, then we put in the archive and state clearly also that this is going to be archived for the reasons that you decide for. So keeping up to date, and also annotated on how you have kept this up to date. So these were we went through all the 10 simple rules that we had, that as Leyla said in the beginning, where we described, that have been described in the 10 simple rules paper. And now what we wanted to do with you, we would like to have, is a discussion. So we have created a collaborative Google Doc.
So let's join through what we have right now in the document. Let me see this one. This one's where I will quickly go through. Don't know, you're still seeing my screen, right?
Yes, we can still see your screen, yes.
Okay, so this one was about the link. Thanks for asking. We added a link. And there was a question about common repositories for training materials regarding how to share them. Once you have a release, yes.
I have it already added 3. If you have, so I have some, you can find slides today, for example, and data sets in Zenodo, Figshare, or F1000 Research, but maybe there are others also. If you know of any others, please, you can add them. It would be very, very good to everyone.
Zenodo and Figshare are very popular because Zenodo is totally free. Figshare, I think it has some payment under some circumstances. For F1000, it all depends whether the slides are being deposited there as part of a conference, for instance.
No, not
which are the cases.
It's for documents, slides, and all this. It's for free. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to know. Okay, so let's going to start with our rule number 2 about findability. So I'm really happy to see that we have some positive comments about how useful the matching processable metadata is for your training materials. And I'm saying that I'm happy to see this because then the next question is, how would you add metadata to your training materials? And if you didn't realize about this before, if this is news for you, I'm sorry to be me, the one who is delivering. FAIR brings a lot of extra work for all of us. And this thing about making things matching processable, it's not that easy. We will need to understand what matching processable means, what is a structured format, how to use it, how to deliver, where to put it. So that's why I was asking on the second part of this rule, how would you add metadata to your training materials? Because we want to understand how aware you are about the different options that are there. So people are mentioning JSON and JSON LD. Happy about that. My background is computer science, by the way. So you can see that I get really happy about things that are in that domain of computer science. But you see, some people don't really know how to add metadata to the training materials, and it's pretty common, I would say. Even if you ask people working for software, for instance, that you would expect maybe to be more familiar with these, sometimes they don't know how to add metadata to their software in order to describe the software. So we are not alone there. It's this kind of requirement that comes with FAIR about adding metadata for everything. It's something that we are still getting used to it. It's becoming easier because we have been learning about it, and there have been talks, publications, presentations, training materials around FAIR that are making it easier for us to understand this bit about metadata, but it is still an issue. So it's good to see here. I told you that we want you to use your feedback here to decide where to go next in our training platform work around FAIR. And then we know that we need to provide most probably training materials about how to add the metadata to the training materials. Can we use markup language? Markup language is not fully structured. It still will render as text, so it's still kind of difficult for machines, I'm afraid so. And no, because of the same reason, just the README for the people, yes. For people is great, but matching processable, not that much. For people, yes. YAML, yes, not my favorite, but yes, YAML is a structure. JSON from the ones that have been, or JSON LD from the ones that have been mentioned here, are the ones that I would say are really making things easier for machines, not for people. I cannot imagine that a person enjoys reading a JSON file, but in any case, all this is also important that you mention it for the human public somewhere in your training materials. It's going to move. Prem, Patricia, let me know if we see any question raised on our question and answers or chat or something.
Yes, yes, we will let you know.
Thank you.
Yeah,
What kind of metadata, ontologies, and control vocabulary you are using? Some people are not using any of them. Some people are using bioschemas, but they are still not happy about bioschemas and schema.org. I know I'm part of the bioschemas group. Patricia and Michelle, who is part of the audience as well. So yes, we are trying to make things better in bioschemas. I can tell you what it is done in schema.org is kind of out of our control. But we participate with these communities via issues, via GitHub, in order to make things better there. There is a question, can you describe why JSON LD is better than YAML? Particularly JSON LD, this LD here in JSON LD is linked data, which basically means that it follows a very well-structured format that YAML doesn't. So the linked data is supported on semantic technologies. YAML is not. I'm not sure if I'm answer the questions in a way that everybody is understanding, because of course this involves some other topics like semantic web ontologies and so on. So please raise your hand and let me know if you need any further clarification in there. But the thing is that JSON LD has a better structure, more semantic than YAML. Of course, YAML is very useful and it's very well known and very well used. And it can be parsed by computers. So it is doable. It's not an issue. Now, rule number 3. Oh, can we have a training ontology? Ah, okay, yes. We will pass this information to the platform training in ELIXIR. They will be happy to know that people are asking for some new training materials. Rule number 3, give your training materials a unique identity. So what value do you see on the PIDs? Easy to refer to specific version or specific workshop? Yes, indeed, because every time that you create a new version, you will have a new DOI or a modified DOI in that case, so they can link to the previous version, and so on. Indeed, the PIDs are useful for that. And the PIDs also make things easier for computer to find this unique element that will tell them beyond any doubt, yes, this is the one that the person is looking for. What persistence? Zenodo is up to the expectations. The persistent identifiers used by Zenodo is DOI. DOI is what you will get out of Zenodo. And they are very commonly used. Maybe because they were first used for publications and people were so used to publications that they say, okay, why cannot we use the same identifier for other things? And nowadays is broadly used for publications, for slides, for data sets, and so on. Yes, even for software, because Zenodo will give you a DOI for software as well. Register your training materials. So let me see if I figure it out. Domain restricted. Okay, yes. Register your training materials. That was the question about open or fair. No, you can't be totally fair without being open. And even if you require any payment to access your training materials or your data sets and so on, you can still be fair. Fair and openness are two different things. So yes, payment is not an issue regarding fair. So what benefits do education-oriented registries bring to you? More visibility to the community. Community is very important here because so many times the registries also are targeting training materials for a specific community. Training materials for social sciences, training materials for life sciences, training materials for physics or maths. So it is very important to have these, and that's why we prefer specialized registries on training materials rather than just saying like, oh, but for sure Google will be able to find my materials, right? So yes, this is a very important reason, and we are happy that some of you share this reason with us. Now define the access rules for your training materials. License. The access in fairness is more about letting know people how they are supposed to do in order to get access. Licenses to reuse them a little bit more. So the access is about, do they have to subscribe to a membership? Do they have to subscribe to a newsletter? Or here is the training material. There you go. You can access it. You can use it immediately. So yes, it is a bit complemented with the license. It's totally true. But then it's about membership. So remember next time that if you require membership to access your training material, make sure that you are stating that clearly somewhere so people know how to get access to it, or even if you require some payment for it. Patricia, we'll let you continue with rule number 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Please go ahead.
Yes. So for the interoperable format, yeah, there was a discussion there that you can see, as Leyla already said, about being fair or being open. One thing does not imply the other one. And yeah, we all want them to be open, but we also want them to be fair. The discussion about the formats here, there are many. I can really see the PDFs, of course, we are using more and more. It's difficult to edit them. You can edit them, but then you also have to have a paid version of Adobe to or something else, I don't know, to be able to edit them. So it's not the most easiest one to let people reuse. Other types of, that's nice. We have other types also of formats that could be PPTX. Is it open enough to be modifiable? Yes, you can open that. Yes, someone answered that. You can use OpenOffice and other versions of this that you can modify and adapt PPTX. So that I assume I can the discussion about this on how this can be Markdown is also a good way. Yeah, that's for sure. If we are willing to go to other formats, I had a question for you. So it's true that Google Slides and nowadays Google Docs are so much used and so easy to be modified by anyone. We can easily give access to that, and anyone can reuse them very easily. But there are some countries where Google is not allowed, for example, in China. So is there any kind of other very broadly accessible platform that can be used by anyone? If you are aware of any of those, we will be happy to hear. For the making for trainers, materials reusable for trainers, which of the, yeah, we are using more and more GitHub for having training materials online that can be easily changed easily. You still need to learn the Git language to be able to do things more extensively, but you can, to edit something is very easy and quick also. And HackMD, yes, also to do slides, to create slides and create text also, and make them contributable by anyone. Someone wrote, yeah, the person uses Galaxy training materials. Yes, they are, and I don't know which kind of format they are, the Galaxy training materials. If they can be quickly or easily changed, modified. Maybe it's like the carpentries also, they use GitHub for that, and I guess maybe Galaxy also uses the same platform.
Patricia, may I interrupt? There is one question from Lance Parsons coming through the question box, and it's general about interoperable formats. So what is the main goal of interoperable formats? Is it future readability, accessibility, or reusability, or modifiability?
In the case that for the training materials, we have defined for interoperable between one person and another one. You see, one trainer, for example, taking the materials and being able to take that and do a course also. So in this case here for training materials, we're thinking about this, and not necessarily a machine reading the materials and being able to teach, or a machine reading the materials and giving that to another machine. Why not? But we thought more about the trainers in this case here. For this specific case, for the training materials we're talking about. For the data and for software and other things, then is a different way of seeing the interoperable form interoperability in FAIR.
Okay, thank you, Patricia.
I think we should leave the discussion right now. I mean, it has been very interesting, and if you want to keep going and adding your thoughts in here, it will be very useful for us, and eventually it will be very useful for the whole training community, because we will take these and we will continue working on these fairness for training materials, creating training materials for it, and so on. But we are 2 minutes late to finish this session, so just to be respectful with the time of everybody, I would suggest, Prem, Patricia, let's go into close here. So Prem, if you want to say some final words for everybody.
I just wanted to say thanks for everyone, also for Leyla for doing this with me, and for all of you for participating in that. It was very, very active. Thank you.